What is the true measure of a person's worth? Is it the suit they wear, the title on their business card, or the weight of the gold on their wrist? We live in a world that rushes to label, to categorize, to place everyone in a neat little box. The CEO in this box, the janitor in that one. The powerful here, the invisible over there. But what if we're wrong? What if the most brilliant mind in the room isn't the one at the head of the table, but the one clearing it? This is a story about a woman who wore a simple apron, and a man who wore a crown of wealth. It's a story about a single moment that shattered every assumption, and it begins, as so many important moments do, with a whisper of desperation in a room full of noise. Her name was Layla. To the patrons of the Gilded Spoon, a restaurant so exclusive it felt less like a place to eat and more like a museum of wealth, she was just a pair of hands. Hands that refilled water glasses, that cleared away finished plates, that moved with a quiet efficiency designed to be unnoticed. She was part of the scenery, a ghost in a black and white uniform. Her face was often partially obscured by the fall of her dark hair, her eyes downcast not from shyness, but from a habit of observation. She saw everything. The nervous tick of a young man on a first date, the subtle disappointment in a wife's eyes as her husband checked his phone again, the false bravado of a businessman trying to close a deal. She saw the intricate, unspoken dance of human connection and disconnection. This quiet observation was her only inheritance. Her father had been a man of similar disposition, a logistics genius who saw the world not as a collection of places, but as a series of interconnected systems. He could see the flow of things, the hidden blockages, the elegant pathways that others missed. He had built a small shipping company from the ground up on this talent, but his genius in systems was matched by a naivety in people. He was betrayed by a partner, and his world, and Layla's, had collapsed into a mountain of debt and heartbreak. He had passed away a year later, leaving Layla with nothing but his lessons, his notebooks filled with diagrams and theories, and a profound understanding of how easily great things can fall apart. So she worked at the Gilded Spoon, her brilliant mind occupied with memorizing wine pairings and ensuring the salt shakers were always full. It was an honest living, but every day felt like she was wearing a costume that was 2 sizes too small for her soul. On this particular evening, the air in the restaurant was thick with a different kind of tension. It emanated from the corner booth, a throne of plush red leather occupied by Sheikh Amir Al-Fahim. He was a man who didn't just enter a room, he conquered it. His presence was a gravitational force, pulling the attention of everyone, including the restaurant's perpetually flustered manager, Mr. Henderson, who orbited the table like a nervous moon. Sheikh Amir was the CEO of Al-Fahim Global, a colossal logistics and technology empire that moved a significant percentage of the world's goods. He was a titan of industry, a modern king whose kingdom was made of shipping containers, data centers, and stock tickers. But tonight, the king's kingdom was on fire. On the sleek, impossibly thin tablet in front of him, a video conference call was in session. A dozen faces, his top executives from around the world, stared out, their expressions a mixture of fear and incompetence. They were failing him. A critical flaw in their new, fully automated distribution network, the jewel in his corporate crown, had caused a catastrophic system-wide failure. Ports were jammed. Shipments were lost. $100 billion merger, the culmination of his life's work, was set to collapse if they couldn't fix it within the next 48 hours. Millions of dollars were turning to smoke with every passing minute. Report. Amir's voice was low, a dangerous rumble that cut through the restaurant's polite hum. A man in a suit, his face pale on the screen, began to stammer. Sir, we've tried rerouting through the secondary hubs, but the algorithm isn't adapting. It's a cascade failure. We can't find the origin point. Amir's hand clenched into a fist on the table. You can't find it? I pay you men a combined salary of $20 million a year to find it. I have given you the most advanced system on the planet, and you tell me you are beaten by a ghost in your own machine? He was losing control, the carefully constructed facade of a calm, powerful leader cracking under the immense pressure. Mr. Henderson scurried over, his face a mask of professional terror. Is everything to your satisfaction, Your Excellency? Perhaps some coffee? A dessert? Amir didn't even look at him. He swiped a hand through the air, dismissing the manager like a fly. His gaze swept across the restaurant, across the faces of the wealthy patrons who lived in a world of blissful ignorance, unaware of the empires rising and falling around them. His eyes, burning with frustration, finally landed on Layla. She was at the next table, carefully clearing away the remnants of a meal, her movements fluid and precise. To him, in that moment, she was the embodiment of everything outside his crisis: simple, untroubled, insignificant. A bitter, ugly laugh escaped his lips. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated cynicism. He picked up his tablet, the screen a dizzying web of red lines and flashing warning signs that represented his crumbling empire. He thrust it forward, not just at Layla, but at the universe itself. "Here," he sneered, the word dripping with contempt. "You want to be useful?" His voice rose, loud enough for nearby tables to turn and stare. "Fix this. Fix my multi-billion-dollar disaster." He leaned back, a cruel smile playing on his lips as he delivered the punchline, a challenge so absurd it was meant only to wound. "Fix this, and I'll give you $100 million. The room fell silent. Mr. Henderson's face went white. He started to rush forward, to apologize, to drag Layla away from the volatile sheik. But Layla didn't move. She just stood there, her eyes locked on the screen of the tablet. And in the heart of the digital storm, in the chaotic mess of lines and data that had stumped a team of the world's most expensive experts, she saw a pattern. She saw a mistake. A simple, fatal flaw she recognized with the chilling certainty of a recurring nightmare. She saw the ghost that had haunted her father. The sneer on Sheikh Amir's face was a fortress of arrogance, built to protect a man drowning in his own creation. The $100 million offer was not a proposition, it was a weapon, a verbal backhand meant to put the world, and the little waitress in front of him, back in their proper, insignificant place. He expected her to stammer, to shrink away, to scurry back to the kitchen in fear and embarrassment. He expected his outburst to be the final, bitter punctuation on a day of utter failure. What he did not expect was the silence. Layla remained perfectly still, her gaze fixed on the tablet. The frantic, flashing diagram of his broken supply chain seemed to hold her in a trance. Mr. Henderson, however, reacted exactly as predicted. He rushed to the table, his hands fluttering nervously. "Your Excellency, I am so sorry. Please forgive the intrusion. She is new. She doesn't know her place." He turned to Layla, his voice a furious, panicked hiss. "What are you doing? Get back to the kitchen now. You are fired. Do you hear me? Fired." Layla didn't hear him. The manager's frantic whispers, the curious stares from other diners, the suffocating opulence of the room, it all faded away. All she could see was the screen. The diagram was a language she understood intimately. It spoke of inputs and outputs, of flow rates and stress points. It was the language her father had taught her, not in a classroom, but at their own kitchen table, sketching ideas on napkins as he dreamed of building a perfect, efficient world. She saw the cascading red alerts, the digital screams of a system in its death throes. Amir's experts were looking at the branches of the problem, trying to prune the dying leaves while the root was rotting. They were focused on the distribution network, the ships, the trucks, the last mile of delivery. But Layla knew, with a certainty that made her breath catch in her throat, that they were wrong. The problem wasn't in the branches. It was in the seed. "You're looking in the wrong place," she said. Her voice was quiet, barely a whisper, yet it cut through the tension in the booth with the sharpness of a diamond. Amir, who had already dismissed her and was turning back to the grim faces on his video call, froze. He turned his head slowly, an expression of disbelief on his face. "What did you say?" Mr. Henderson grabbed Layla's arm, his fingers digging into her skin. "Be quiet! You will apologize to the sheik and you will leave my restaurant." But Layla pulled her arm free, her eyes never leaving Amir's. A lifetime of being invisible, of swallowing her thoughts, of hiding the brilliant mind she'd inherited, came to a breaking point. The memory of her father's defeated face, the shame of their ruin, flashed before her eyes. Not again. She would not stand by and watch another good system fail because of a blind spot. I said, she repeated, her voice clearer now, steadier. You're all looking in the wrong place. Your team is trying to fix the symptoms. The traffic jams, the delayed shipments. But the sickness is somewhere else. Amir leaned forward, his dark eyes narrowing. The sneer was gone, replaced by a flicker of genuine, dangerous curiosity. Explain. It was a command, not a request. Behind him, on the tablet screen, his executives began to murmur, their faces a mixture of confusion and offense at the audacity of a waitress critiquing their work. One of them, a stern-faced man with silver hair, spoke up. Sir, with all due respect, this is a highly complex logistical matrix. We have 36 PhDs analyzing the data. I hardly think a food server can silence Marcus. Amir snapped, his gaze still locked on Layla. He gestured to the tablet. The PhDs are failing. Let the food server speak. The weight of that moment pressed down on Layla. The chance to be heard, the risk of being humiliated. She took a deep breath, the scent of expensive perfume and gourmet food filling her lungs. She pointed a slender finger at the screen, at a small, seemingly insignificant node in the upper left corner of the diagram, a part of the system so foundational that no one had thought to question it. It's here, she said. The automated intake hub in Singapore. Your new algorithm is designed for predictive packing. It fills containers based on projected demand, not actual orders. But your legacy inventory system, the one that logs the incoming goods, still operates on a sequential, order-based protocol. The two systems are speaking different languages. She looked up at him, her eyes clear and direct. Your new, brilliant system is trying to run a marathon, but your old system is forcing it to tie its shoes before every single step. It's creating a microscopic delay, a fraction of a second, for every single crate that enters the hub. But you process millions of crates an hour. Those fractions are compounding. They're creating a digital traffic jam at the very start of the chain. Everything else, all of this, she gestured to the chaos on the screen, is just a crash happening in slow motion. A profound stillness settled over the table. The executives on the screen were silent, their faces frozen in shock. Mr. Henderson's jaw was slack. He had expected her to offer the Sheikh a glass of water, not a multi-billion-dollar systems analysis. Amir stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. He saw past the cheap uniform and the tired posture. He saw the fierce intelligence in her eyes, the unshakable confidence in her voice. He saw a mind that moved like his own, a mind that saw the whole machine, not just the individual gears. He had thrown out an impossible challenge as a joke, a way to vent his rage at the world. And the world, in the form of a quiet waitress, had just answered. The linen napkin was still on the table, a pristine white square amidst the crystal and silver. Without breaking eye contact with Amir, Layla picked it up. May I? She asked, gesturing to the pen clipped to the inside of his jacket. He nodded, his movements slow, almost dazed, and handed it to her. The pen was heavy, solid gold, an object worth more than she made in a month. But in her hand, it became a simple tool. Mr. Henderson made a strangled noise, a protest dying in his throat as he watched his carefully maintained world of etiquette and order completely unravel. A waitress was about to draw on a linen napkin for one of the most powerful men in the world. Layla smoothed the napkin on the table and began to draw. Her hand didn't shake. The lines she drew were clean, confident, and purposeful. She didn't sketch the sprawling, chaotic web that was on the tablet. Instead, she drew two simple boxes. This is your inventory system, she said, tapping the first box. And this is your predictive packing algorithm. She drew an arrow between them, but it was tangled, looped back on itself, a visual representation of the conflict she had just described. They are fighting each other. Every time the algorithm tries to optimize a container, the inventory system flags a discrepancy because the order it's expecting hasn't been logged in its old-fashioned way. It triggers a micro-audit, A verification request. A ghost in the machine, like your man said? But it's not a ghost. It's a bottleneck of your own design. She then drew a third, smaller box between the first two. You don't need to rewrite the entire system. You need a bridge. A translation layer. A simple piece of middleware that intercepts the algorithm's predictive manifest and reformats it into a sequential list that the legacy system can understand before the physical goods even arrive at the dock. It would be like a pre-approved checklist. The inventory system would see the list it expects, tick the boxes, and the flow would be seamless. She sketched out the new path, a single, elegant line that flowed from one box to the next through her new bridge. There's no more delay. No more compounding error. The jam disappears because it never starts. She put the pen down. The entire explanation had taken less than 90 seconds. On the napkin was a solution so simple, so profoundly logical, that it was breathtaking. It wasn't just a fix, it was an improvement, a way of making the two systems work in harmony, stronger together than they were apart. On the video call, Marcus Thorne, the silver-haired executive, finally found his voice. He cleared his throat, his professional condescension warring with a dawning sense of horror at his own team's oversight. That's theoretically possible. But the integration of a middleware protocol would take weeks to code and implement. We don't have weeks. Layla shook her head, a flicker of impatience in her eyes. It was the same short-sightedness that had bankrupted her father. People who saw problems instead of possibilities. You don't have to build it from scratch, she said, her tone direct. Your passenger airline division already uses a similar translation protocol for its baggage handling systems, reconciling predictive passenger load data with the actual scanned luggage. The base code already exists within your own company. You just need to adapt it. A good team could have a patch ready for beta testing in under 3 hours. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the sound of a dozen high-paid executives realizing they had been completely and utterly outmaneuvered by a waitress with a napkin. They had been trying to solve a riddle from within the labyrinth, while she had simply floated above it and seen the path. Amir stared at the drawing. He picked up the napkin, holding it as if it were a precious manuscript. He saw it all, the elegance, the efficiency, the genius. He had spent $1 billion on a system, and its salvation was drawn on a piece of cloth that was destined for the laundry. He slowly raised his eyes to meet Layla's. The last traces of his anger and frustration had vanished, replaced by an emotion he hadn't felt in years. Awe. He felt like a man who had been colorblind his whole life and had just been shown a rainbow. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice a quiet murmur, filled with genuine wonder. Before Layla could answer, Mr. Henderson, finally recovering his senses, stepped in, his face slick with sweat. "She is nobody, Your Excellency. A temporary employee. I assure you she will be dealt with." "This is a complete breach of, she is not nobody," Amir said, his voice cutting through the manager's babbling with the cold authority of a king. He stood up, a towering figure of power and decision. He folded the napkin carefully and tucked it into his breast pocket, beside the gold pen. He looked at Layla, who stood her ground, her heart pounding but her expression calm. "You said this theory needs to be shown. To be implemented." He paused, his gaze sweeping over her simple uniform, the worn but clean shoes, the quiet dignity in her posture. "Come with me. Show me." It was a pivotal moment, a fork in the road of her life. Behind her was the familiar world of Mr. Henderson, of clearing tables and being invisible, a world of quiet survival. In front of her was the Sheikh, a man of impossible wealth and power, offering a door into a world she had only ever dreamed of, a world where her mind would be her greatest asset. Mr. Henderson grabbed her arm again, more desperately this time. "You can't. You have tables to clear. You work for me." Layla looked at the manager's terrified face, and for the first time, she felt not fear or resentment, but a kind of pity. He was a man trapped in his own small kingdom of rules and titles, unable to see the universe of possibilities beyond it. She looked back at Sheikh Amir. "Okay. she said, the single word sealing her fate. Amir gave a curt nod. He pulled out a wallet, dropped a black credit card on the table without looking at the bill, and turned to leave. My car is waiting. As they walked towards the exit, he paused and looked back at the stunned Mr. Henderson. And for the record, he said, his voice dangerously soft, she doesn't work for you anymore. The ride in the back of the Rolls-Royce was like entering another dimension. The world outside, with its traffic and noise, slid by silently behind tinted glass. The air inside smelled of rich leather and quiet power. Layla sat on the plush seat, her waitress uniform feeling like a ridiculous costume. She was acutely aware of the contrast between her own worn existence and the effortless luxury that surrounded her. She looked at her hands, the nails clean but short, the skin slightly rough from work. Next to her, Sheikh Amir was on his phone, his voice once again the calm, decisive instrument of a commander. Get me the head of the aviation tech division. Yes, now. And clear the main boardroom. I want every single member of the logistics executive committee there in person or on screen in 15 minutes. No excuses. He ended the call and turned to her. The car's soft interior lights cast shadows on his face, making him look less like a corporate titan and more like a desert chieftain from another era. They will be skeptical, he said. They will see your uniform, not your mind. They will try to tear you down to protect their own pride. Men like Marcus Thorne, my second-in-command, have built their careers on being the smartest men in the room. You will be a threat to that. Layla met his gaze, her own resolve hardening. I'm not afraid of them, she said. I'm not there to win a popularity contest. I'm there to solve a problem. A rare, genuine smile touched Amir's lips. Good, he said. Because their pride is not my concern. My company is. The Al Fahim Global Headquarters was a skyscraper that pierced the clouds, a monument of glass and steel. As Layla walked through the cavernous marble lobby, flanked by Amir and his security detail, she felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. People in perfectly tailored suits stopped and stared, their faces a mixture of shock and disdain. Whispers followed her like a ripple in the water. Who was she? The CEO's new cleaner? A strange publicity stunt? The contempt was a physical force, pressing in on her, but she kept her head high, remembering her father's words, it doesn't matter what they think you are. It only matters what you know you can do. The boardroom was on the top floor, a vast space with a panoramic view of the city lights sprawling below like a carpet of diamonds. A long, polished obsidian table dominated the room, surrounded by 24 high-backed chairs. Most were already filled with the men and women she had seen on the tablet screen, including the stern-faced Marcus Thorne, who now stood at the head of the table, his arms crossed, his expression one of pure, undiluted skepticism. He looked at Layla's uniform and gave a barely perceptible sneer. Amir took his seat at the head of the table and gestured for Layla to stand beside him. The room was tense, the air crackling with resentment and confusion. Ladies and gentlemen, Amir began, his voice echoing in the silent room. As you know, we are facing an unprecedented operational crisis. For the last 24 hours, your combined expertise has yielded nothing. Therefore, I am exploring a new perspective. He gestured towards Layla. This is Layla. She has a theory. I want you all to listen. Marcus Thorne stepped forward, his tone oozing with condescension. A theory? Sir, with all due respect, we are implementing dozens of contingency plans based on hard data. What could this person possibly offer? Layla stepped forward before Amir could respond. She felt a strange calm settle over her. This was her arena. Not the restaurant, but here, in the heart of the system. She looked directly at Thorne. Your contingency plans are all reactive, she said, her voice steady and clear. You're trying to build dams to stop a flood. I'm suggesting you turn off the faucet. She walked to the large smart screen that dominated one wall, the same chaotic diagram from Amir's tablet now displayed in massive detail. She picked up a stylus. Your data is correct, she began, disarming them immediately. But your interpretation is flawed. You're seeing millions of individual errors and trying to solve them one by 1 inch. She zoomed in on the Singapore hub, just as she had described. But they are not individual errors. They are echoes of a single, primary failure. Right here. For the next 20 minutes, Layla held court. She didn't just re-explain her theory, she proved it. She directed them to pull up specific data logs, strings of code from the legacy system, and performance metrics from the aviation division's baggage protocol. She wove them together, creating an undeniable tapestry of logic. She spoke their language, of processing speeds, data redundancy, and algorithmic efficiency, but with a clarity and vision they all lacked. She was no longer a waitress. She was a conductor, and the chaotic noise of their data was her orchestra. She was making it sing. The executives, one by one, fell silent. Their skepticism melted away, replaced by a dawning, humbling realization. She was right. The solution had been right there, buried in their own files, and they had all been too blind, too arrogant, too stuck in their own specialized silos to see it. Marcus Thorne's face had gone from smug to pale. He, the man who prided himself on his meticulous attention to detail, had missed the most fundamental error of all. Layla had not only solved the problem, she had exposed the fatal flaw in their entire brain trust, a failure of imagination. He saw his career, his reputation, flashing before his eyes. He had to discredit her. "It's a clever theory," Thorne interjected, trying to regain control. "But it's just that, a theory. The risk of integrating a new piece of code into a live, unstable system is astronomical. It could make things worse. It could bring the entire network down permanently." It was a valid point, a professional's caution against a layman's enthusiasm. He was banking on her having no answer for practical implementation. He was wrong. "You're right," Layla said, turning to face him. "Deploying it system-wide would be reckless. That's why you don't." The room waited. "You isolate the smallest, lowest traffic network first, the freight line between Perth and Adelaide. It's a closed loop with minimal external dependencies. You create a sandbox environment and run a simulation using the last 6 hours of real-world data from that line. Then you deploy the patch into that sandbox. If it works, the simulation will show the bottleneck disappearing in minutes. If it fails, it has no effect on the wider system. The risk is contained." She looked at the stunned faces around the table. Total time for the simulation to yield a definitive result: 25 minutes. It was checkmate. She hadn't just offered a solution, she had provided a low-risk, high-speed implementation and testing plan. She had thought 3 steps ahead of everyone in the room. Amir, who had been watching the entire exchange with a hawk's intensity, finally spoke. He looked at his shell-shocked head of technology. "Do it," he commanded. Now. The next hour was the longest of Layla's life. The tech team, galvanized into action, worked frantically, their fingers flying across keyboards. Marcus Thorne stood in the corner, a silent, brooding statue of defeated pride. Layla stood by the main screen, answering the engineer's questions with a calm precision that belied the storm of emotion inside her. She felt her father's presence in that room, a proud, encouraging warmth on her shoulder. This was for him. This was the validation he had never received. They ran the simulation. The screen split, showing 2 models side by side. On the left, the existing data from the Perth-Adelaide line, a mess of red alerts and backed-up statuses. On the right, the same data running through the simulation with her patched-in translation bridge. For the first few minutes, nothing changed. Then, a single red alert on the right-hand screen flickered and turned green. Then another. And another. Within 10 minutes, a wave of green swept across the simulation. The bottleneck was gone. The flow was smooth, efficient, and faster than it had ever been before. A collective gasp went through the room. It was working. It was working perfectly. The head of technology turned to Amir, his face shining with sweat and disbelief. It's elegant, sir. It's not just a patch. It's an optimization. It's increasing overall efficiency by nearly 15%. Amir didn't look at his tech chief. He only looked at Layla. The awe he had felt in the restaurant had now deepened into something else, a profound and unshakable respect. He had built his empire by identifying value where others saw none. He had made his fortune betting on disruptive ideas and overlooked assets. And standing before him, in a simple waitress uniform, was the most valuable, overlooked asset he had ever encountered in his life. The crisis was over. The order was given to roll out the patch across the entire global network. The $100 billion merger was secure. The kingdom was safe. The sun was beginning to rise, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, a new day for the city and for Al Fahim Global. Amir led Layla from the now celebratory boardroom to his private office. It was a space that was both minimalist and majestic, with a single, massive window that made it feel as if they were floating above the world. He went to his desk, typed for a moment on his computer, and then turned a monitor towards her. On the screen was a bank transfer confirmation. The amount was staggering, a string of zeros that seemed to bend reality. $100 million. Transferred to a new trust account in her name, Layla Hassan. He had kept his promise. Layla looked at the number, but she felt strangely numb. The money was life-changing, of course. It was freedom, it was security, it was the end of a lifetime of struggle. But in that moment, it felt secondary. The real victory had been in the boardroom, the moment when her mind had been seen, her voice had been heard, her worth had been proven. "Thank you," she said, her voice quiet. Amir shook his head. "It is I who should be thanking you," he said, his voice laced with a sincerity she knew was rare for him. "You did more than save my company tonight, Layla. You saved me from my own blindness. I surround myself with men who tell me what I want to hear, who think in the same straight lines that I do. I built a glass tower and forgot to look at the people on the street. You reminded me that talent, true genius, doesn't wear a uniform. It doesn't have a title." He walked over to the window, looking down at the awakening city. "That money is yours. It is a debt paid. But I have another offer for you, and it is not a debt, but an investment. In you." He turned back to her. "I don't want you to leave. I want you to stay. I want you to build a new department for this company. We'll call it the Department of Strategic Innovation, but in truth, it will be the Department of Seeing Things Differently. You will report to no one but me. You will have unlimited resources. Your only job will be to look at our systems, our people, our entire way of doing business, and find the flaws we are too blind to see. You will challenge everything." It was a breathtaking offer. More than money, it was purpose. It was a chance to build, to create, to honor her father's legacy on a scale she could never have imagined. It was the chance to ensure that no other brilliant system would ever fail because of a simple, overlooked flaw. Tears welled in her eyes, the first she had allowed herself to shed all night. They were not tears of sadness or relief, but of profound, overwhelming gratitude. "Yes," she whispered. "I accept." A few weeks later, Layla walked through the lobby of the Al Fahim Global headquarters. She was no longer in her waitress uniform. She wore a simple but elegant business suit, her hair tied back, her expression confident and focused. The people who had once stared at her with contempt now nodded with respect, whispering her name in awe. She was the napkin genius, the woman who had saved the company in a single night. She was already a legend. As she headed to the elevator, she passed Marcus Thorne. He looked diminished, his former arrogance replaced by a grudging, hard-won respect. He gave her a stiff nod. "Ms. Hassan, Mr. Thorne," she replied, her voice even, before stepping into the elevator and pressing the button for the top floor. Her journey was just beginning. That evening, to celebrate, she decided to return to a place that felt like it was from another lifetime, the Gilded Spoon. She wasn't there for revenge, but for closure. She sat at a small table, and a new waiter approached. But then, from the side, he was pushed away. Mr. Henderson, still the manager, his face pale and his hands trembling slightly, stood there with a menu. He had been told by Sheikh Amir's office that Ms. Hassan was to be treated as the most important guest he had ever served. The irony was thick enough to taste. "Good evening, Ms. Hassan," he stammered, his eyes unable to meet hers. "Welcome. What can I get for you this evening?" Layla looked at the man who had fired her, who had seen her as less than nothing. She felt no anger, only a quiet sense of the world having righted itself. "I'll just have a glass of water, thank you," she said softly. "I'm not very hungry." She was, in fact, starving. Starving for the work that lay ahead, for the problems she would solve, for the future she would build. And so, we come back to the beginning. What is the true measure of a person's worth? It is not the clothes they wear or the job they do. It is the quality of their thoughts, the depth of their character, the courage to speak up when they have something to say. Layla's story is a reminder that there are geniuses working in our coffee shops, stocking our grocery shelves, and driving our buses. There are heroes hiding in plain sight, waiting for just one person to look past the uniform and see the mind within. The world is full of overlooked virtuosos and hidden gems. Perhaps you know one. Perhaps you are one. So the next time you are about to dismiss someone based on their station in life, stop. Look closer. Listen. You might just find the one person who can solve your impossible problem. Share this story if you believe that potential is everywhere, and that everyone deserves the chance to be seen. Comment below with a time someone surprised you with their hidden talent. Remind the world, and remind yourself, that a title is a label, but a mind is a universe.